Hey, what's up, YouTube? Welcome to a little director's commentary for my latest VFX short, F-Zero, Return of the Blue Falcon. I had the idea to do a VFX short for this, I don't know, quite a while ago. I didn't know how to go about doing it for the longest time because, well, such a vehicle doesn't exist. I had to kind of model it from scratch, and I wanted to kind of put a new spin on what the Blue Falcon looks like. Captain Falcon said that in the story mode of F-Zero GX, that if he won the Grand Prix, he would take the proceeds, the monetary proceeds, and build the Neo Blue Falcon, which is like the newest incarnation of that vehicle. And I was like, you know what, that sounds really awesome. I want to do that. So I spent quite a bit of time, modeling a brand new Blue Falcon from scratch. I just went into Cinema 4D and kind of put it together with a couple of shots of the original Blue Falcon from F-Zero GX, and used kind of the profile of it, to kind of get an idea of what it would look like. And the size, so the shape of the wings, and where the vents are, and where the turning paddle and all that kind of stuff is, that's the same on the Neo Blue Falcon as it is, the older one, the original one. And so I spent a lot of time putting that together. And once I had the craft, I had to figure out how to do the visual effects to put this into the real world. So I sat on it for a while. And until one day I was watching a behind-the-scenes video for Sam and Nico, and they did a video for Grand Theft Auto, and they had this really crazy shot where they were following somebody, and they got into a car, and then the camera hovers above the car, and the car takes off driving down the street, and the camera's following them. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. How do they do this? So I was watching their behind the scenes video, and they said that they got a stabilized gimbal, like a GoPro gimbal or something, and I was watching them. They tied it to a big old boom pole or a broomstick, and they handed it off, and they had another car drive up, and they handed it to somebody who was standing out of the sunroof, and they kind of held it above the car as it drove off. And I thought, wow, that's such a brilliant idea. So I took the idea and ran with it. I ended up renting a DJI Osmo X5 gimbal, which is a motorized 3-axis gimbal, and it was the X5 is the one that has the ability to take micro Four Thirds lenses. So I rented the Panasonic Leica 30mm lens to go with it, and I just gaff taped it to a boom pole. We just shoved it out of the sunroof of a car and drove around Santa Clarita and got some shots of the streets, empty streets. And ultimately I had to take that entire clip and time warp it down 400 or 500%, just to make it look like it was going a lot faster. Added a bunch of motion blur and stuff like that, so it worked out really well. But I think that without that setup, without the idea from Sam and Nico, I wouldn't have been able to do this video. The storyboard I put together for it had to be as thorough as possible, because with a VFX short, you have to know how to accomplish each individual piece. And I ended up kind of throwing myself, like a wrench in the system, at the last second. Originally in the storyboard, I had just had back-to-back shots of the Blue Falcon speeding down the streets and hitting a boost station, a charging station, all this kind of stuff. And at the last minute, the day that we were shooting, I was like, you know what, I need to add something to this. So I ended up doing these really great shots of tracking in and around Max as he's sitting there pretending to drive this thing. And it turned out really great, because I feel like that really kind of puts you into the how fast this vehicle is going. In order to have Max sit in this car, I had to buy a racing seat from jegs.com, and I mounted it on a piece of wood, connected by a Lazy Susan that I had bought at the Home Depot. So you had to drill holes into it and then get it to fit through the other side, so the chair could spin, and then this kind of wooden plate that it was mounted on would stay still. I was really lucky that I had access to a render farm while rendering all of this stuff, because those shots where he is speeding along in the Falcon, that entire background is itself like an 8 city blocks that was created. I actually bought the model off of Turbo Squid, and you know, added the trees and added the texturing and some of the stuff in the background. But that's such an enormous like Cinema 4D file. Like there'd be no way I could render that like at home, because otherwise like I'd like still be waiting for it. It'd be done rendering in like 2020 or whatever. After I put the visual effects together, it was a lot of fun to mix it down with the audio, because you know, like a vehicle like this is going to have a super unique sound, right? So I was trying to think to myself, like, what kind of sounds would go into making this like Falcon sound, you know? And I thought about lifting the sound effects directly from the game, but you know, I didn't want it to be too familiar. I wanted it to be brand new, because you know, this Neo Blue Falcon is like a brand new, you know, vehicle that, you know, kind of like nobody's ever seen before. Although, you know, staying true to like the rhyme and reason of what the Blue Falcon should look like, it's a new version of it. It's like the next generation, the next model. And so I thought to myself, what kind of sounds would go together well and accomplish this? So I ended up layering up a few different things. The first one was an F-18 jet. The second one was like a 757 passenger airliner. The third one is a butane torch, that kind of like noise that you get when you have like a welding torch. And then the fourth one is, I have snippets of a Skyline R34 GTR spooling up with that monster turbo. Especially, you can hear it especially when you know, he goes over the boost station. That's one of the parts you can really hear it. But other than that, I just took those 4 layers together and added some sound effects to each one of them individually. And combined, they produce that sound, that like really crazy jet sound that one would think the Blue Falcon should sound like. I actually wrote the music that's in the second half of the shorts like a really long time ago. I put it together like summertime of like 2015, so it had been like, you know, like a year and a half when I like wrote this piece of music, and it always reminded me of like, you know, F-Zero, and it just had that kind of that like guitar sound and that like, you know, techno-y flavor, that fast-paced like electronica guitar type sound that, you know, you would hear in those games. And I loved it so much, it just kind of always stuck with me. So when it came time to make the music for the short, that was the first thing that I thought of. I knew that I was going to use that track in the shorts before I even shot the thing, before I even wrote it. So that was pretty cool. And then of course the music that's in the first half, I wrote that, you know, like after the short was done. There's quite a bit of layers to that too, but I wanted to kind of mix it up a little bit. The intro is supposed to be like really dramatic, you know, it's got that kind of that CSI vibe, you know, with like lots of like, you know, organized noise layers. And then second portion, you know, it's a little more laid back, it's a little chill and stuff like that. But together I think it works really nicely, and you know, it's like really high energy, because that's what this thing needs. I mean, putting this short together was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I mean, you know, it involved, you know, calculating, you know, the amount of time warp that was required for making the outdoor shots, you know, look really good, and then for the layers where Max is sitting in the car driving, I actually had to render them separately, but I had to make sure that, you know, the shadows were being captured by the, you know, the reflections and all kind of stuff. So I had to render those things in 2 separate, you know, so there's like a lot of thought process behind it, and you know, I learned a lot of different things, and of course, you know, the modeling of the Falcon itself was, you know, a huge leap forward for me in my personal, like, you know, skill set, because I've never done that before. I mean, I manipulated models and done things, but I'd never really modeled and textured my own. And I love how everything came together in the end, because to me it's kind of like a throwback to when I used to play F-Zero, and I kept thinking to myself, like, you know, I would love to drive that car, you know, and you know, here we are many years later, and I was able to like kind of make that come to life. All right, well, thanks for checking out the commentary for F-Zero behind the scenes. Be sure to subscribe for more visual effects videos, and I'm going to do tutorials too. If you have any requests for visual effects videos, tutorials, or anything filmmaking related, like, let me know, and I'll hook you up.